Well, we're back, and I guess I'm all by myself because nobody really likes me, but that's okay.
No,
Hi, I'm Ken, and you're?
I'm John, and we're dealing with technical difficulties.
And we're back from commercial.
So if the commercial looked as bad to you as it did to us on the screen, we're sorry, but hopefully we're back now. Are we looking good now?
We're still trying to find out what's going on.
Okay,
we're looking. But anyway, tonight we're really excited. We have a guest with us who is an expert in the area of stone and quartz surfacing. His name is Mark Titus. He's with Construction Solutions, distributors of Avanza Quartz, Illustra Solid Surface, and Granite Slabs.
And Silestone, right?
Well, no, that's something else altogether different.
Oh, that's something altogether different. Okay, sorry.
How
you doing, Mark? Good to see you. Thanks.
So we're glad to have you here tonight, and gosh, do we have a pile to cover. So much to discuss. First, we really wanted to talk about, from your end as a distributor, some of the differences you find in granites, and maybe explain why that is the case.
Well, typically, like you went through the history of the granite, explaining the different species or colors of granite, you really have two different schools as far as thicknesses. They come in 3 centimeter and 2 centimeter. They can come thinner than that when they're in tile, but typically for countertops, you're seeing two dominant thicknesses in those two.
Okay.
And then you start running into the different colors.
When you say dominant thicknesses, you mean 2 cm and 3 cm?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And then as far as the different colors go, depending on the area of the country that you're working in, some colors are going to be, from an aesthetic standpoint, are going to be more dominant in an area, just because in the South you tend to have a lot of the grays, or it's not grays, but the light or browns, the beiges.
Okay.
Maybe in the North you start to have a little more of the darker colors. Out west, it's more your terracotta or your reddish, rusty type colors.
And again, that's because of why Ken was talking about the way the earth was formed and all the things that make the granite,
Or
correct?
actually more aesthetic demand, isn't it?
Exactly. It's not
I
actually where
thought
they're
you were talking about
no.
was quarried under the ground.
No.
Okay. All right. So just what people happen to like.
Purely aesthetics.
Oh, okay, great.
And again, that's also going to play into that 2 centimeter thickness versus 3 centimeter in the kitchens.
Okay.
Typically in the bathrooms, you see a lot of 2 centimeter thickness used in the bathrooms.
Same as you'd have 1 inch solid surface in a vanity and 1.5 inches in
Now,
Exactly.
also, I know there are parts of the country where people are taking the 2 cm and building it up to get a 4 cm thickness.
Right, and again, that goes back to the aesthetics and what you're looking for in your top. And the reason that you have the two, typically in the stones, they're a little more difficult to handle because unlike a quartz, which is taking a lot of natural product and then processing it, man's processing it, whereas the granites are nature processes.
Now, quartz, you're talking E-stone.
E-quartz or
Engineered stone.
E-stone, engineered stone,
Okay,
exactly.
all right.
With the granites and the marbles, you have fissures, you have natural cracks in them. And then again, from species to species, some are very uniform, like this one. Some have a little more movement to them, like those. Typically, the more movement you have, the more brittle the stone becomes.
Now, when you say movement, that's where you have like different coloring veins running through
exactly.
it, and you get a lot of variation in pattern. You might have one area that's really dark with a lot of rust to it, but yet you migrate over to another part of the slab, and there may be almost tan tones with just a little bit of brown to it.
Correct. So what you run into is that handling aspect, and that's going to determine. The fabricators typically would prefer to work with the 3 centimeter just because it's easier to run through their shop, handling and whatnot, less chance of breakage and damage to the top. But again,
because of the thickness.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, to the consumer, would there be any difference between 2 cm or 3?
Absolutely not. It's purely an aesthetic in that how thick they build up that edge.
Okay, now, I know there are some granites that are fiberglass backed.
Right, and that's when you get in. The reason you do that, that gives a little more structural integrity to the slab. The more movement, the more fissures it has in it, the more brittle that slab is going to be. They put that fiberglass mesh on the back that helps give it structural integrity when they're moving the big slabs around and when they're moving countertops in the shop and getting them out and installed.
Now, and once again, typically you would really assign that to those real dramatic stones.
Yeah, typically the more higher end, more expensive the stone, the more movement it has in it, and it becomes more brittle at that point.
And of course, one of the
more
benefits,
expensive to work with and what have you.
Exactly.
And of course, from the aesthetic into the marketplace, I would think the more dramatic the stone is, the more personal it is.
Correct. Typically, that's somebody when you're looking for something very distinct. You go out into the slab yard. You'll hand select your slabs that you want your countertop to be
That's a
fabricated
countertop
from.
that your neighbor next door down the street can't get another one of. You're the only one. Pretty
Exactly. Exactly. Like a snowflake.
much. Yep.
Right.
There you go.
Well, I would say, I would think that, the more, hate to say this, but the more money someone has, the more they want something that's unique, that nobody else can get a hold of, so they're willing to pay for that special piece of stone for their countertops.
Right. That's exactly what happens.
Okay. All right.
So with the granites, once again, a stone like this, you'd want to definitely be a lot more careful in how you handle that, as opposed to this, which is far more consistent.
Correct.
Okay, and that certainly makes sense. The size of the crystals is not as critical as the consistency of its makeup, right?
To a certain aspect, yes. The larger, and again, it really depends on the color. Some colors have very large chunks, for lack of a better term. They can be a dense stone and be a very strong in a slab form. Others, it may not be the case. You may have very large particulate in there, and it may be a stone that is a very brittle stone. So,
okay, and one of the things I want to kind of move to from that, one of the things you hear a lot about stone, one of the characteristics is its porosity, the presentation of fissures. Obviously, the more perhaps dramatic the stone, the more fissures you're seeing at, the greater the porosity. It's much more likely to stain, whereas you get some stones which are smaller presentation of the minerals, a smaller formation of mineral crystals. They're packed much tighter. The stone has much greater density, much greater weight, and therefore the porosity is minimal.
greatly reduced. Exactly. Rule of thumb, the darker the stone, the more dense, less porous it is. The lighter the color, you're getting closer to whatever the process that goes through that's forming it. Maybe not had as much temperature, maybe not had as much pressure on it, so it's not as dense at all. So there, it's going to require much more maintenance as far as a sealer, and it may be a more brittle stone. And that's just kind of a rule of thumb to use, as your darker colors are going to be your more dense, less chance of less need of maintenance as far as reapplying a sealer to it, and
Okay, so
less
your
chance of
stones,
damaging.
almost always need a sealer, the
Yes.
natural stones.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's good to know, because a lot of people don't want maintenance on it. It'll look real nice, but they don't want to maintain it at all.
Now, some
Exactly.
stones, the quarries are actually beginning now to impregnate them with resins and sealers.
Yeah, a lot of your higher end stones, and again, depending on the type of stone, how many fissures it has in it, what the surface actually looks like, you're gonna want them to be resin filled, is the term that's used. It costs a little more money, but what it does is it gives you a more uniform finish after it's been polished. It gives you a much nicer look when you look in that low angle light. You don't see those fissures.
How do they polish the top of the material? Because I know when you're fabricating it, it's not, you don't want to touch the top.
Right.
What type of machines?
It's very large polishing machines
Like big
on
diamond
lines.
stones?
Big, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So when you scratch something like this, it's generally very difficult to make a repair.
Right. When you get in there, again, it's like anything. It's like anything in fabrication. It truly is an art. It's more difficult to replicate that finish that big polishing machine has done when you're working out with a hand tool and polishing. A very good artist with that hand polisher can easily do that.
Okay.
So really, it's the art and how well versed that technician is in polishing.
Okay.
Now, one of the things I am curious about, and we're talking about the whole polishing and the maintenance, from the standpoint of the homeowner, that's something that they need to be aware of. That a lot of people think you buy granite, you buy something that's impervious to damage. It is certainly possible for the homeowner to damage their countertops, and it's like, oh no.
And that's very important for the fabricators that are actually having the contact with the end user, is to educate them on what type of an expectation they should have of the performance of the stone. You may have a person that does a tremendous amount of cooking, that has exposing the top to a lot of oils, wines, citric acids, and whatnot. And from that perspective, they're telling you, they come in, well, I really want this beautiful light colored stone. Well, for somebody like that, you're going to have a lot of chance for damaging that top. So you need to give those people, explain to them what it is, what the performance of that stone that they're interested in, so they don't have any unrealistic expectations going into it.
You really want to steer that kind of person towards the direction of the real darker, heavier, denser stones.
Or an engineered stone.
Or an engineered stone,
Okay, yeah.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Now, while we're also into the natural stone conversation, let's take a moment and jump into the area of the sedimentary stones, like out of the hat, let's say marble.
Okay. There you're dealing with in relation to granite, a very porous stone. It really, for somebody that's going to truly use their kitchen, I highly recommend they don't use marbles in the kitchen.
They took them out of the
Again,
fudge shops, didn't they?
I don't know if that may be something with the health department.
The health
Again,
department,
I
because
don't
they got
know
bacteria in the marble and you can't get it out. I remember hearing something about that. So that tells me it's very soft.
I know that from a regulation standpoint, typically you're not allowed to use the stones, natural stones, in a food prep area.
Okay.
Typically, your county codes with the health department don't allow that. But as far as the marbles go, typically you see that more in a bathroom application, simply because it's not going to take the abuse that it is in the kitchen. And it's a little different look, too. For whatever reason, typically the aesthetics of it, people like that aesthetic more in a bathroom application than they typically do in a kitchen application.
Now, I know marbles will show bruising, they'll show impact marks.
And don't they take on the odors too? No, seriously. I mean, like the old bathroom stalls and stuff were marble, weren't they? Like the old stone stalls. Right. And I know that I remember in the old days
you walked around smelling the stalls.
You'd be able when they tore down a building, you could take out the stalls and stuff, but the actual the partitions actually smelled.
Okay.
They actually absorbed the smell, and it was terrible. You couldn't get rid of it.
Could be, I don't.
Hey, well,
okay, John.
Well, hey, I mean, we all have the things we know.
But marble, one of the problems I know with marble is its porosity. So even like in a bathroom situation, you still have to be very careful with perfumes that have oils in them, because they'll stain the marble and
you have to be very diligent with your sealer. And it's very easy to see. Sealers are going to break down over time, and they're also going that breakdown is going to be accelerated when heat is applied to them. A quick rule of thumb is very similar to car wax. You put water on that top, if it beads up, your sealer's still good.
Okay.
As soon as you don't get that nice bead on there,
you need to do
time
something.
to reseal.
So then would it be fair to say, Mark, that if you're going to do someone's home, that your work areas, the cooking areas, would be more traditionally either a solid surface material or an E-stone, and maybe an accent area could be the natural stone that's not going to get that heavy use? If you're less inclined to want to keep up with your sealer, and again, depending on the color. Well, I'm thinking most people don't.
But in a case like that, yes, you're not going to with the E-stones, the quartz products, because they're 93% quartz and 7% resin and pigments, they are non-porous. So you don't have to apply any sealers to any of the quartz products. So from that standpoint, like a solid surface, it's non-porous, so you don't have to. It's a lower maintenance from the standpoint of having to reapply.
I remember one customer we heard a story that she had all quartz countertops put in throughout her house in different areas, and they had this huge open house party. And she called the fabricator the next day and said, "I had a big party last night. How do I get all the rings off the stone from all the glasses and all the drinks and everything?" And he said, "You don't."
Well, that was in quartz. That was granite.
I'm sorry, in granite. In granite. Yeah, but it was porous, and they had all stained.
Yeah.
And so we know that granite probably carries the higher end of protection from that type of damage, depending on the type of granite, slowly sliding down a scale. Marble would present a higher degree of maintenance, and probably the last thing we're really going to look at as far as Though slate is definitely a player, but a very small player in the world of residential surfacing.
Right.
That'd be more in the commercial line. But and slate is metamorphic rock, so it has a whole different set of characteristics. But residentially, probably the final thing we probably might typically see would be sandstone, soapstone.
Yeah, those are pretty heavy.
Right, and there you're running into a completely different beast. When you get into a sandstone or a soapstone, you're sedimentary. Depending on what you're going to do with that kitchen, how much cooking you're actually going to be doing, that's really going to help guide you on whether I really like the aesthetics of that, but it doesn't fit in to what I'm going to be doing with that countertop.
And the characteristics that you'd really be looking at with those kind of stones is they tend to be very soft. I know one job that we did when I was in fabrication, had a shop. I remember for part of the kitchen they were putting in a soapstone. And I remember one of our guys were going to put down a tool on it, and the soapstone guy just said, "Oh, don't do that," because just the weight of the router.
Why would anybody want to put that in their house?
Aesthetics.
Yeah.
It's very aesthetically appealing.
look they
Obviously,
were going
nobody
for.
with kids.
Yeah.
Well, no, you're just going to pull that top out and replace it quickly.
We're going to be going to break here in just a minute. When we get back from break, I think we're going to concentrate on E-stone, or quartz, as it's commonly called, and how it's manufactured and some of the advantages of it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about handling this equipment, or handling this material in your shop as opposed to solid surface material.
And one of the things that John's going to do in the last segment, we're going to actually put all 4 pieces of this stone stacked on top of his head, and we're going to bust them with a sledgehammer. So we'll see you right after the commercial.
All right, we'll be right back. Okay, this